Well, I really think that this was a predictable end to the impeachment trial, and really nothing did stand out. I mean, the fact that Mitt Romney did vote to convict on the one article of impeachment is noteworthy, although I don't think it's entirely surprising. During the entire process, he has been one of the lone Republicans who called for witnesses. He's more of a moderate. He also represents a district in which his constituency supports him quite a bit, and he's quite safe. So the fact that he stepped across the aisle isn't wholly surprising. But I have to say, this ended very much in a way that I think experts could have predicted from the very outset.
Okay, so experts could have predicted it from the outset. When Americans wake up tomorrow, and this trial's been going on for months, will anything have changed?
I don't think too much will change. I mean, certainly we've seen extreme levels of partisan polarization be even more entrenched as a result of this impeachment trial. But I think that the battle lines are really drawn between Democrats and Republicans, and you're going to see both voters on either side be very, very mobilized going into the 2020 election. I think in some ways it's useful to look at what impact this will have historically. I think history will view this impeachment most of all as reflecting the extreme levels of partisan polarization that afflicts the United States right now. In that sense, Trump isn't the cause, but he's a symptom of that problem. And I think what we did see here is politicians who are just so beholden to their parties and so consumed by the next election that they decline to put the interest of the American people above their own. And I think that's fueled a decline in trust in institutions of power. And regrettably, I think that this process will only entrench that further.
Okay, so if this has only resulted probably in polarization, in terms of partisan polarization, what does this impeachment trial tell you about the state of democracy in the United States?
That's a really interesting question. And of course, scholars and policymakers can debate that, and they will debate that going forward. I do think that fundamentally the basic institutions of power in the United States are still strong, especially relative to other countries. But this has certainly frayed them, and it has challenged and tested them in a way that I think that they haven't been subjected to in many, many years. And there have been fairly vociferous calls by Democrats and very apocalyptic comments by Democrats that the fact that the Senate didn't hold what they refer to as a real trial sets a very dangerous precedent for the United States going forward and puts it in a fairly precarious situation. And so I don't think that those are entirely unwarranted claims, but at the same time, I still think that the United States, it's gotten through difficult periods before, and I think it has and will continue to do so.
Well, you were talking about the Senate trial there and criticisms of it, and obviously the fact that John Bolton didn't testify in front of the Senate was very much part of those criticisms. And I was speaking to NBC's Chris Malone just a second ago, and he was just saying even if John Bolton had testified, he didn't really think that would have changed the outcome. Do you think it might have done?
I don't think that it would have changed the outcome either, because basically the default position for Republicans from the very beginning has been to either say that Trump did nothing wrong and that his behavior was perfect, or to say that even if he did something wrong, even if his actions in Ukraine were inappropriate, that they didn't rise to the level of an impeachable offense. And in fact, one of the key votes that kept witnesses from appearing in this Senate came from Lamar Alexander. And he basically made exactly that point. He said, I don't think that there's any dispute about the facts. I don't have any doubt that Trump did something wrong in Ukraine. But he said he'd rather leave this up to the American people in 2020 rather than Congress overreaching. So I think that John Bolton's testimony would have certainly been powerful. It would have been very dramatic. It would have captured a lot of attention. But I think that the facts were well known, and I don't think that that would have kind of budged Republicans in the direction of voting to convict.
Well, as you say, if the facts were well known, Donald Trump has been acquitted. Many commentators are saying, well, what would stop Donald Trump, therefore, now he's been acquitted, from doing exactly the same thing again?
That's a really good point. And I do think that it sets a dangerous precedent that Trump wasn't held accountable in this sense, because it promotes essentially a culture of impunity. It provides cover for future presidents to act in similar ways that violate the spirit of the Constitution for their own personal gain. But I think it's particularly dangerous because, it's certainly not implausible that Trump will get a second term. And a defining trait of Trump's administration, and in fact, the president has said this, is that he essentially thinks that the Constitution gives him the power as president to do almost anything that he wants. And so, the president shouldn't be above the law. This president shouldn't be. No president should be. And the fact that there was no accountability here, I do think does raise very important questions about what precedent it sets going forward.